On my son's 28th birthday, I drove to his apartment with a gift and my heart full of hope, but when I walked through his door, I heard my own voice coming from someone's phone speaker, the private voicemail I'd left him about missing his mother. The room full of strangers was laughing. Trevor saw me standing there, and instead of stopping it, he said, "Dad, maybe you should go." I left without a word, but 3 days later, Trevor's phone started ringing. It wasn't me calling. You won't believe who else wanted to talk to him about those voicemails. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Now, let's start. I reached for the second coffee mug before catching myself, my hand freezing halfway to the cabinet. 10 months. 10 months since Catherine's heart gave out on a Tuesday morning while she was watering her roses, and I still made coffee for two every single day. The muscle memory of 35 years of marriage doesn't just disappear because the other half of your world does. I poured the extra coffee back into the pot and sat at our kitchen table, my kitchen table now, staring at the empty chair across from me. The silence in the house wasn't just quiet. It was aggressive, pressing against my eardrums like water at the bottom of a deep pool. Catherine had been the talker in our marriage. She'd fill every morning with plans of the day, gossip from her book club, observations about the neighbors, dreams about retirement we'd never get to share. I'd been content to listen, to grunt agreement while reading my paper, to let her voice wash over me like familiar music. Now the quiet was killing me. I picked up my phone and dialed Trevor's number, waiting for the inevitable voicemail greeting. He never answered anymore, not since a funeral when everyone stopped calling to check on me and life supposedly went back to normal. But I couldn't go back to normal. Normal had died with Catherine. "Hey, son," I said after the beep, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just wanted to tell you, I was thinking about your 8th birthday this morning. Remember when Mom made you that red cape? You insisted you were a superhero and spent the whole afternoon jumping off the porch steps, trying to fly. Mom was terrified you'd break your neck, but you were so determined. You always were determined, even as a little guy." I paused, staring out the window at Catherine's rose garden. The bushes were fuller than ever this year, as if she was still tending them somehow. "I'm making pot roast tonight. Your favorite, the way Mom used to make it with those little potatoes you loved. Come by if you want. I always make too much anyway." I almost said, "I love you," but settled for, "Hope you have a good day at work, Trevor." I'd been a postal worker for 35 years, the kind of job people made jokes about, but it had given us a good life. Steady paycheck, health insurance. Home by 4 o'clock every day to help Trevor with homework and drive him to soccer practice. Catherine used to tease that I knew every dog on my route by name, and she wasn't wrong. There was something satisfying about connecting people, bringing them pieces of their lives every day. Letters from grandchildren, birthday cards, bills that meant they still had electricity. All of it mattered. Now I rattled around the house like a marble in an empty jar. At lunch, I called Trevor again. Me again. Saw Mrs. Patterson's new puppy today. Little golden retriever, just like Buster when you were 12. Remember how Buster used to wait for you to get home from school? He'd start whining at 3:30 every day, like he had an internal clock. Dogs know love, don't they? They know who matters. I hung up quickly, worried I sounded foolish. The afternoon stretched endlessly. I tried watching television, but every show reminded me of something Catherine and I had watched together. I attempted to read her book club selection. Some romance novel she'd been excited about, but the words swam on the page. By 5 o'clock, I was calling Trevor again. "The roses are incredible this year," I told his voicemail. "Your mom's garden is like she never left. The red ones by the kitchen window are blooming, so bright they almost hurt to look at. She always said roses were like love. They need attention and patience, but when they bloom, they're worth all the work." She was right about that. She was right about most things. When Trevor's car pulled into the driveway at 6:30, my heart actually jumped. I'd been hoping he'd come for dinner, but part of me hadn't believed he would. "Hey, Dad," he said, barely looking up from his phone as he walked in. He was 28 now, tall like me but with Catherine's dark eyes and stubborn chin. His hair was styled in some trendy way I didn't understand, and he wore clothes that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Pot roast's ready," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "Just like Mom made it." Trevor nodded absently, still typing on his phone. Throughout dinner, he answered messages between bites, occasionally grunting responses to my attempts at conversation. I asked about his job at the marketing company, about his girlfriend Brianna, whom I'd never met, about his apartment downtown. Each question got a 1 or 2 word answer. Finally, desperate to connect, I mentioned Catherine's birthday next month. I was thinking we could visit the cemetery together, maybe bring those yellow daisies she loved. "Dad, stop." Trevor's voice was sharp, irritated. "I don't want to hear about Mom every single day. It's been 10 months. You need to move on." The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my fork, my appetite gone. "I'm sorry. I know you're right. I miss talking to someone." Trevor's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. "I know, Dad. I get it, but dwelling on it isn't healthy." He stayed for dessert, Catherine's apple crisp recipe, and even helped clear the dishes. But by 8 o'clock, he was making excuses about an early meeting and heading for the door. After he left, I sat in my recliner and called his voicemail one more time. "Thanks for coming tonight, son. It meant the world to me. Having you here made the house feel like a home again, even for a little while. Sleep well." I hung up and stared at Catherine's empty chair, wondering if Trevor was right. Maybe I did need to move on. But moving on felt like betraying her memory, like admitting that 35 years of love could just disappear into silence. Outside, the roses nodded in the evening breeze, keeping their secrets. 2 weeks passed in the usual rhythm of silence and voicemails. I'd started talking to Catherine's photograph on the mantle, which probably wasn't healthy, but at least she never told me to move on. Then Trevor's name lit up my phone screen on a Wednesday afternoon, and my heart nearly stopped. He never called anymore. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded different, almost nervous. "So, my birthday's a Saturday, and I'm having a party at my place. I was wondering if you'd like to come." I gripped the phone tighter, certain I'd misheard. "Really? You want me there?" "Yeah, of course. It's my 28th, so it's kind of a big deal. Brianna's been planning it for weeks. She's excited to finally meet you." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I'd love to come, son. What time? What should I bring?" "Should I?" 7 o'clock. "Just bring yourself, Dad. And maybe dress. Nice but not too formal. It's going to be a younger crowd." After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen grinning like a fool. Trevor wanted me at his birthday party. He wanted me to meet his girlfriend, his friends. Maybe I'd been wrong about pulling away from me. Maybe his irritation the other night had just been stress. I drove to mall the next day, something I hadn't done since buying Catherine's last Christmas present. The saleswoman at Men's Warehouse was patient with my fumbling questions about what young people wear nowadays, and helped me select dark jeans and a navy button-down that didn't scream old man trying too hard. The total made me wince, but seeing Trevor happy would be worth every penny. For his gift, I chose a leather wallet with his initials embossed in gold, tucking inside a photo of the 3 of us from his college graduation. We were all laughing at something Catherine had said, arms around each other, looking like the family I thought we still were. Saturday evening found me standing before my bathroom mirror, adjusting the new shirt for the 10th time. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed Trevor's voicemail, a habit so ingrained I didn't even think about it. "Hey, son, just getting ready to head over to your party. I can't tell you how excited I am to finally meet your friends and see Brianna. You've built such an impressive life, and I'm so proud of the man you've become. Your mom will be over the moon seeing you so happy and successful. See you soon." Trevor's building was all glass and steel, the kind of place Catherine and I used to drive past wondering who could afford such luxury. The elevator was mirrored, showing me multiple reflections of a nervous 64-year-old man in stiff new clothes, clutching a wrapped gift. Music pounded from behind Trevor's door, electronic noise with no melody I could recognize. When Trevor answered, I barely recognized him either. His hair was gelled into artful spikes. He wore a fitted black shirt that probably cost more than my grocery budget, and his smile looked strained. Dad, you made it. Come in, come in. The apartment was packed with people who looked like they'd stepped from magazine covers. Everyone seemed impossibly young and beautiful, holding craft cocktails in mason jars, talking loudly over the thumping bass. I felt like an alien who crash-landed at the wrong planet celebration. Everyone, this is my dad, Marcus. Trevor announced to a nearby group, his voice tight. They turned with polite but distant smiles, the kind you give to someone's embarrassing relative. Nice to meet you all, I said, raising my voice over the music. Trevor's told me so much about his friends. A lie, but it seemed appropriate. A woman with platinum hair and perfect makeup pushed through the crowd. She was stunning in an artificial way, like a photograph that had been filtered beyond recognition. You must be Marcus. I'm Brianna, Trevor's girlfriend. Her smile was blindingly white, but her eyes assessed me like I was a problem requiring management. I've heard so much about you. Another lie, probably, but I smiled back. The pleasure's all mine. Trevor's very lucky. Oh, you're sweet, she laughed, a sound like expensive wind chimes. Trevor, your dad is adorable. Adorable? Like a pet? I tried joining conversations, but every topic was foreign. Someone discussed their content strategy. Another complained about algorithm changes. A third debated micro-influencer authenticity. When I mentioned my postal career, try to connect through stories about the interesting mail I delivered over 3 decades. Their eyes glazed with polite boredom. So you delivered Amazon packages? Asked a bearded young man. Well, not exactly. Regular mail, letters, personal correspondence. You'd be surprised how much community connection happens through. Oh my God, Bree, you have to see this. Someone interrupted, shoving a phone at Brianna. I found myself standing alone, nursing a craft beer I didn't understand, watching Trevor laugh with people who understood his world in ways I never would. He seemed genuinely happy, animated, and confident. Despite feeling out of place, I was proud of him. Brianna dominated every conversation, constantly filming with her phone, talking about her brand and authentic engagement with her community. She had thousands of followers, apparently, who hung on her every posted moment. The noise became overwhelming. I was considering making polite excuses to leave early when Brianna suddenly clapped her hands, commanding the room's attention. Okay, everyone, time for some special birthday entertainment. She pulled out her phone with a grin that made my stomach clench. Something in her expression reminded me of a cat that had cornered a mouse. So, Trevor's dad here is quite the talker, she announced, and several people snickered. He leaves the most interesting voicemails. The blood drained from my face as understanding crashed over me like ice water. No, he wouldn't have. He couldn't have shared those private messages, those vulnerable moments when I poured my grief and love into his voicemail box. But Brianna was already pressing play, and suddenly my voice filled the room through her phone speaker. Hey, son, just wanted to tell you I was thinking about your 8th birthday this morning. Remember when Mom made you that red cape? The room erupted in laughter. My private memory, my tender recollection of Trevor as a determined little boy, had become entertainment for strangers. I watched faces around me light up with cruel amusement as my voice continued, talking about Catherine's terror, about Trevor's stubborn determination to fly. Oh my God, the superhero thing, someone shrieked. That's priceless. Brianna grinned wider, scrolling to another message. My lunch voicemail about Mrs. Patterson's puppy began playing. Remember how Buster used to wait for you to get home from school? Dogs know love, don't they? They know who matters. More laughter, louder now. Someone was recording with their phone. My desperate attempt to connect with my son through shared memories was being mocked by people who didn't even know my name. I looked at Trevor, standing frozen across the room. His face was red, but not with anger at the betrayal of his father's trust. He looked embarrassed. Embarrassed by me. Brianna had found a third voicemail. My voice, smaller and more vulnerable than I'd realized, filled the room again. But Trevor wasn't moving to stop this. He wasn't defending me. He was just standing there, letting it happen. Brianna wasn't finished. She scrolled through her phone with the practiced ease of someone who lived for an audience, her smile growing wider as she found her next selection. "Oh, this one's even better," she announced, and my evening message about Catherine's roses began playing through the speaker. "The roses are incredible this year. Your mom's garden is like she never left. The red ones by the kitchen window are blooming so bright they almost hurt to look at." My voice cracked slightly on the recording as I talked about Catherine's philosophy on roses and love, about attention and patience, in the privacy of my grief. Speaking to what I thought was my son's private voicemail, I'd let my vulnerability show. Now that raw emotion was being served up for the entertainment of strangers. She always said roses were like love. They need attention and patience. But when they bloom, they're worth all the work. The laughter was louder now, more cruel. Someone near the kitchen called out, "Get this man a hobby." Another voice added, "Maybe a dating app." The room rippled with amusement at my expense. Brianna paused the playback, addressing her audience like a talk show host. "I mean, can you imagine getting these every single day? The man is obsessed with his dead wife." The casual cruelty of those words, dead wife, hit me like a physical blow. Catherine wasn't just dead wife. She was my partner for 35 years, the mother of Trevor's children, the woman who'd raised him with endless patience and love. But to these people, she was just a punchline. "It gets better," Brianna continued, scrolling again. Here's one from just last week. My bedtime message began playing, the one where I'd thanked Trevor for coming to dinner. My voice on the recording was soft with gratitude, almost reverent in its appreciation for the few hours my son had spent with me. "Thanks for coming tonight, son. It meant the world to me. Having you here made the house feel like a home again, even for a little while." The intimacy of that moment, my honest gratitude for Trevor's presence, was now being dissected for laughs. Someone in the crowd made exaggerated sobbing sounds. Another person called out, "Stage 5 clinger alert." I felt like I was watching myself being flayed alive. These weren't just voicemails. They were pieces of my soul, private conversations with my son, where I'd bear my loneliness and love without filter or shame. Now, they were content for social media mockery. But Brianna wasn't done. She held up her phone like a prize, grinning at her captivated audience. "Okay, but this is the absolute best one. I literally cannot even." The message that began playing was from just 3 days ago, one I'd left after a particularly difficult morning, when Catherine's absence felt like a weight crushing my chest. "I know I called too much, Trevor, but you're all I have left, son. Everyone else has moved on with their lives, but you're the only family I have. You're my connection to Mom, to the life we built together. I love you more than you'll ever know." The room exploded. The laughter was so loud it nearly drowned out my recorded voice. People were doubling over. Some had tears in their eyes from laughing so hard. Multiple phones were now recording, capturing my humiliation for their own social media feeds. "Oh my God, the desperation," someone shrieked. "This is like emotional blackmail," another voice added. Brianna was in her element, providing commentary like a sports announcer. She put on an exaggerated elderly voice, mocking my cadence. "You're all I have left, son. Please love me. I'm so pathetic and alone." The crowd roared its approval. I stood frozen, watching my deepest fears and most honest emotions being transformed into a comedy routine. The vulnerability I'd shared in what I thought was the safety of my son's voicemail had become the highlight of a party where I was the unwitting entertainment. Through it all, Trevor stood motionless across the room. His face was crimson, but not with outrage at this violation of his father's privacy. He looked mortified, not by their cruelty, but by me, by my neediness, my grief, my pathetic attempts to maintain connection with the only family I had left. Our eyes met across the room full of laughing strangers. I searched his face for some sign of the boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried when Buster died, who'd hugged me tight at his high school graduation and whispered, "Thanks for everything, Dad." Instead, I saw a man who was ashamed of me. The laughter was dying down, but phones were still recording. Brianna was already scrolling for more voicemails, treating my private communications like an endless content library. "Should we play another one?" she asked the crowd, who cheered their encouragement. Finally, Trevor moved. But instead of stopping this public evisceration of his father, instead of defending the man who'd worked double shifts to pay for his college, who'd coached his little league team, who'd held him when he cried, Trevor walked over to me with the expression of someone handling an embarrassing situation. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice tight with mortification. Maybe you should go." The words hung in the air between us. Around us, the party continued. People still chuckling about my voicemails. Brianna already moving on to pose for photos with her guests. But in that moment, it was just Trevor and me, and the chasm that had opened between us. I looked at my son, this young man I'd helped shape, whose diapers I'd change, whose nightmares I'd chase away, whose dreams I'd supported unconditionally, and I saw a stranger. "You remember what you said at dinner last week?" I asked quietly, my voice barely audible over music. "The best gift would be you not talking," you said. Trevor's face flushed deeper, but he didn't deny it. I agreed then. I continued, reaching into my pocket for the birthday gift I'd wrapped so carefully. I set it on the nearest table, without ceremony. Now I understand why. I turned toward the door, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. Behind me, the party continued as if nothing had happened. Brianna was already orchestrating a group photo, positioning people around Trevor with his birthday cake. As I walked out of my son's apartment, leaving behind the laughter and the music and the son I thought I knew, I made a promise to myself. Trevor wanted me to stop talking, so I would, completely, but sometimes silence could be the loudest sound of all. I drove home through empty Saturday night streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The silence of my car felt different now, not the crushing loneliness I'd grown accustomed to, but something sharper, more purposeful. It was the silence of a man who'd finally understood the true nature of his situation. Trevor hadn't just shared my voicemails. He'd turned my grief into entertainment, my love into a punchline, my private conversations with my dead wife's memory into content for his girlfriend's social media brand. The betrayal wasn't just in the sharing. It was in the planning, the deliberate cruelty, the calculated decision to use his father's pain for someone else's amusement. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes, staring at the house Catherine and I had bought 36 years ago. The porch light was on, casting long shadows across the lawn she'd planted with flowers that bloomed in sequence through spring and summer. Even in death, she'd planned ahead, ensuring I'd have beauty to tend in her absence. Inside, the silence felt different too. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of decision. I walked to Catherine's photograph on the mantle, the one from our 30th anniversary, where she was laughing at something I had said, her eyes bright with joy and mischief. "I'm done talking to him." I told her picture. "You always said actions speak louder than words. Time to see if you were right." The next morning, Trevor's name appeared on my phone at 9:47 a.m. For the first time in 10 months, I let it ring through to voicemail. 20 minutes later, he called again. I declined the call. By noon, he called 6 times. At 12:15, my phone chimed with a voicemail notification. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without listening. Whatever Trevor had to say, I'd heard enough from him to last a lifetime. The text started after that. "Dad, can we talk? I think there was a misunderstanding last night. I know you're upset, but you're not answering your phone. Brianna feels really bad about what happened. It got out of hand. Dad, please, just call me back." I read each message as it arrived, then deleted it without responding. Trevor wanted to talk? Trevor had been talking plenty. To his friends, to his girlfriend, to strangers on the internet. He'd use his voice to mock me, to share my private grief, to turn my love into entertainment. Now it was my turn to be silent. But silence didn't mean inaction. Monday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I created social media accounts, not to share family photos or connect with old Postal Service colleagues, but to investigate if my private life had become public entertainment. I needed to understand the scope of the damage. Finding Brianna's Instagram was easy. Trevor had mentioned her handle in passing months ago. What I found there made my stomach turn. She'd posted 3 videos from the party. The first was titled, "When Your Boyfriend's Dad Is Extra Faced with Tears of Joy Loudly Crying Face," and showed her playing my voicemail about Catherine's roses while the camera captured people's laughing faces. The video had 847 likes and 23 comments, all mocking my desperation and emotional manipulation. The second video was worse. It was a voicemail where I'd said Trevor was all I had left, with Brianna providing live commentary about toxic parents who refused to let their adult children have boundaries. This one had over 1,200 likes and had been shared to her stories with crying, laughing emojis. The third video was the most devastating. It was a compilation of my voicemail set to trending audio about clingy parents, with text overlay reading POV. Your boyfriend's dad calls him 3 times a day. The comments were brutal. This is literally emotional abuse. Someone get this man a therapist. The secondhand embarrassment is real. Your boyfriend needs to block his number. But it wasn't just Brianna's account. I found Trevor's social media too, and discovered he'd been sharing his own content about me for weeks. Posts about setting healthy boundaries with family, and recognizing emotional manipulation from older relatives. He'd made TikToks about dealing with a parent who won't let go, and Instagram stories about toxic family dynamics. My son had turned our relationship into content. My grief over losing his mother had become his brand. The worst part was realizing this hadn't been spontaneous cruelty at the party. This had been building for months. Trevor had been systematically documenting and monetizing my pain, sharing my vulnerability with strangers who didn't know my name but felt qualified to judge my character. I found comments from people calling me pathetic, manipulative, the worst kind of toxic parent. Strangers who'd never lost a spouse, never buried the love of their life, never experienced the suffocating loneliness of an empty house, were diagnosing me as emotionally abusive based on my son's curated content. One comment stopped me cold. My dad did this shit to me after my mom died. I had to cut him off completely. Some people just can't handle being alone. Trevor had hearted that comment. The phone rang again, Trevor's 5th call of the day. I watched his name flash on the screen until it went quiet. Then I opened his contact information, and for the first time in 28 years, I blocked my son's number. But blocking his calls didn't stop the investigation. Over the next 2 days, I discovered the full scope of how my private grief had been turned into public entertainment. Brianna's videos have been shared by influencer accounts about family drama and generational trauma. My voicemails have been screen recorded and reposted across platforms, always with mocking commentary about clingy dads and emotional manipulation. I found articles on websites I'd never heard of using my story as an example of how not to grieve and the importance of boundaries with difficult parents. My pain had become a cautionary tale. My love transformed into a warning about toxic behavior. Trevor had achieved what he wanted. I'd stopped talking to him. But as I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal, I realized something important. Just because I'd stopped talking didn't mean I was done communicating. I'd spent 35 years in the Postal Service, connecting people through letters and packages. I understood the power of messages, the importance of making sure the right information reached the right people at the right time. Trevor wanted me to stop talking to him. Fine, but I hadn't promised to stop talking to everyone else. I approached documenting my son's betrayal the same way I'd approached 35 years of postal routes, methodically, thoroughly, and with careful attention to detail. Every screenshot was labeled and dated. Every video was saved to multiple locations. If Trevor and Brianna had turned my grief into evidence of my failures, I would turn their cruelty into evidence of theirs. Brianna's TikTok account was a gold mine of horror. She had 47,000 followers and had built her entire brand around what she called lifestyle authenticity and generational healing. Her bio read, "Helping millennials set boundaries with toxic family dynamics, Two Hearts mental health advocate sparkles, living my truth rainbow." Living her truth apparently meant monetizing my pain. I found 17 different videos where she'd used my voicemails as content. Not just the party footage, but carefully edited compilations set to trending sounds about family trauma and emotional manipulation. One video, titled "Red Flags Your Parent is Emotionally Abusive," used my voice saying, "You're all I have left, son," as the prime example of manipulation tactics. The comments section was a feeding frenzy of people sharing their own stories of toxic parents and praising Brianna for exposing this behavior. My private grief had become a community bonding experience for strangers who felt qualified to diagnose my mental health based on 30-second clips. But the TikTok videos were just the beginning. I discovered she cross-posted Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and something called Be Real. My voicemails have been turned into a multimedia empire of mockery, generating thousands of views, likes, and shares across platforms I'd never heard of. The analytics were devastating. The original party video had been viewed 127,000 times. The Toxic Parent Red Flags compilation had reached 340,000 people. Combined, her content featuring my voice had generated over 500,000 views in just 4 days. Each view represented a stranger who now knew my most vulnerable moments. Each like was someone who found my grief entertaining. Each share spread my private pain to new audiences who would never know my name, but would judge my character based on Brianna's narrative. I screenshot everything, creating a digital paper trail that would make any postal inspector proud. Timestamps, view counts, comment threads where people dissected my emotional manipulation and applauded Trevor for standing up to his toxic father. Trevor's own social media presence was equally damning, though more subtle. He'd been building his case against me for months, sharing articles about enmeshed family relationships and healing from childhood emotional abuse. His posts about setting boundaries with difficult family members had been steadily gaining traction, positioning him as a victim of my neediness rather than a son whose father missed him. The worst discovery came when I found a podcast interview Brianna had done just yesterday. She'd appeared on something called Boundary Babes to discuss helping your partner deal with toxic family dynamics. For 47 minutes, she discussed our family situation without using names, but anyone who'd seen her videos would know exactly who she meant. His father calls him multiple times a day, she explained to the host. Like, obsessively. These long, rambling voicemails about his dead wife, trying to guilt my boyfriend into spending time with him. It's textbook emotional manipulation. The host had made some pathetic noises. That must be so hard for your boyfriend to navigate. It really is. He's such a kind person. He feels guilty setting boundaries. But I've helped him see that this isn't normal grieving. This is dependency and control disguised as love. Dependency and control. My daily attempts to maintain connection with my only child have been transformed into psychological warfare. But the podcast reveals something even worse. This wasn't just entertainment for Brianna. It was career advancement. She gained over 8,000 new followers since the party videos went viral. Her engagement rates had skyrocketed. Brands were starting to notice. I found emails and screenshots she'd posted about potential sponsorship deals for her mental health advocacy content. My son's girlfriend was literally profiting from my grief. I mapped out the full network of people who'd been exposed to this content. Trevor's co-workers had seen the videos. I found comments from profiles that matched names he'd mentioned from his marketing company. His gym buddies had shared the posts. Even his landlord had liked one of Brianna's Instagram stories, probably explaining why Trevor had been getting strange looks in his building. The reach was staggering. Between Brianna's followers, Trevor's connections, and the viral nature of the content, I estimated that at least 100,000 people had been exposed to my private voicemails in some form. My reputation as a loving father had been systematically destroyed and replaced with the image of a manipulative, emotionally abusive old man who couldn't handle his wife's death. Throughout my investigation, Trevor continued calling from different numbers. He'd figured out I'd blocked him and started using friends' phones, his work line, even what appeared to be a burner phone. The messages grew increasingly desperate. "Dad, I know you're angry, but we need to talk." This whole thing got blown out of proportion. Brianna feels terrible. She wants to apologize. People are saying awful things online. I'm trying to get the videos taken down. "Dad, please. I'm scared I've lost you forever." I read each message carefully. then deleted it without responding. Trevor was scared he'd lost me. He'd made that choice the moment he'd allowed my private grief to become public entertainment. He'd lost me the moment he'd stood silent while strangers laughed at his father's broken heart. But his panic told me something important. The viral content was starting to have consequences he hadn't anticipated. The beast he and Brianna had fed was growing beyond their control. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked on my door Wednesday evening, holding her phone with a worried expression. "Marcus, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but my granddaughter sent me this video. She said she recognized your voice. Is everything all right?" She showed me Brianna's compilation video on her phone. My neighbor's teenage granddaughter, 3 states away, had recognized my voice in a viral TikTok about toxic parents. That's when I realized the true scope of what Trevor and Brianna had done. They hadn't just humiliated me at a party. They destroyed my reputation globally, turning me into an internet cautionary tale about pathetic old men who couldn't handle loss. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson," I told her gently, "but thank you for checking." As she walked back to her house, I made my final decision. Trevor wanted me to stop talking to him. Fine, I'd honor that request for 6 days now. But I'd never promised to stop talking to his boss, his friends, his landlord, or the 47,000 strangers who thought my grief was entertainment. It was time for someone else to do the talking, and they were going to have a lot to say. Thursday morning, I set my phone in Catherine's garden, positioning it carefully among the roses she'd planted with such hope for the future. The irony wasn't lost on me, using the same technology that had weaponized my grief to tell my own story. But if social media had taught me anything over the past week, it was that narrative control mattered more than truth. I'd spent hours crafting what I wanted to say, writing and rewriting until the words felt right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Restoring the truth about who I was, what I'd lost, and what my son had done with my trust. I pressed record. My name is Marcus Donovan. I'm 64 years old, and I've been a postal worker in Connecticut for 35 years. 10 months ago, I lost my wife, Catherine, to heart failure. She was my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life for 36 years of marriage. I held up our wedding photo, then a picture of the 3 of us from Trevor's high school graduation. This is my son, Trevor. I raised him with Catherine's help, attended every soccer game, helped with homework, worked extra shifts to pay for his college education. When his mother died, I struggled with the silence in our house. So I started calling him daily, leaving voicemails to maintain our connection. I paused, looking directly into the camera. Last Saturday, I attended Trevor's 28th birthday party. His girlfriend Brianna played my private voicemails for the entertainment of their guests. My grief over losing my wife, my love for my son, my most vulnerable moments, all of it became a party game. I played the audio I'd screen recorded from Brianna's videos. Her mocking commentary about my pathetic grief filled the garden air. The sound of strangers laughing at my pain among Catherine's roses created a surreal juxtaposition that I knew would be powerful on camera. "This is Brianna LeClaire," I continued, showing screenshots of her Instagram profile. She has 47,000 followers and has built her social media brand around what she calls mental health advocacy. She's posted 17 videos using my private voicemails, generating over 500,000 views and thousands of dollars in revenue from my family's tragedy. I displayed the screenshots methodically, her TikToks, Instagram posts, the podcast interview where she called me manipulative and abusive. Each piece of evidence was clear and damning. My son works at Zenith Marketing Solutions in Hartford. His girlfriend has turned our family crisis into content for profit, and he has participated willingly. They've labeled my grief as toxic behavior and emotional manipulation to justify monetizing my pain. I held up Trevor's childhood photos, him in the superhero cape, holding Buster the golden retriever, graduating from college with Catherine, and me beaming beside him. This is the boy I raised. This is the man who allowed strangers to mock his father's love and his mother's memory for social media entertainment. The video was 8 minutes long. I uploaded it to every platform I'd learned to use: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, even Twitter. I tag local news stations, national media outlets, and elder advocacy organizations. I use hashtags like hashtag elder abuse, hashtag social media cruelty, and hashtag grief shaming that I've researched during my investigation. Then I waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 hours, the video had been viewed 10,000 times. By evening, that number had reached 50,000. The comments section filled with outrage on my behalf. This is absolutely heartbreaking. How could his own son allow this? Brianna should be ashamed of herself. Profiting off this man's grief is disgusting. I lost my husband last year. This could have been me. This is elder abuse. Someone find this man's son's employer. This is workplace relevant behavior. People began sharing their own stories of loss, of difficult relationships with adult children, of feeling judged for grieving too long or too publicly. My video had tapped into something larger than my personal situation, a growing concern about how social media culture turns private pain into public entertainment. By Friday morning, local news stations were calling. Channel 8's morning show wanted an interview. The Hartford Courant requested a statement. A producer from a national morning show left a voicemail asking if I'd appear to discuss the intersection of grief, family dynamics, and social media exploitation. The story was spreading beyond Connecticut. Elder advocacy groups shared the video with commentary about digital abuse of seniors. Mental health professionals used it as an example of how social media could weaponize vulnerable people's experiences. Grief counselors shared it in support groups as a discussion starter about complicated family relationships during bereavement. Brianna's social media accounts began hemorrhaging followers. The comments on her videos shifted from supportive to condemnatory. Brands that had been courting her for sponsorship deals quietly withdrew their offers. Someone created a compilation video of her most cruel commentary about my grief, titled, "When Influencers Show Their True Colors." Trevor's workplace received hundreds of emails. Screenshots circulated showing employees at Zenith Marketing Solutions expressing disgust at their colleagues' behavior. The company's HR department was reportedly investigating whether Trevor's participation in viral content mocking his elderly father constituted a violation of their professional conduct policies. But the most satisfying response came from an unexpected source. Catherine's former book club members, women I hadn't spoken since the funeral, began reaching out. They'd seen the video, remembered Catherine's stories about my daily calls to Trevor, and wanted me to know they supported me. "Catherine always said you were the most devoted father she'd ever known," wrote Margaret, the club's longtime leader. "What Trevor did is unforgivable. We're behind you completely." Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door Friday evening with a casserole and tears in her eyes. I should have known something was wrong when my granddaughter showed me that awful video. "You're the kindest man in the neighborhood, Marcus. Catherine would be so proud of how you handled this." The national morning show called back with confirmed appearance for Monday. They wanted to discuss how social media platforms could better protect vulnerable users from exploitation, using my story as a case study. I sat in Catherine's garden that evening, surrounded by her roses, and the overwhelming support of strangers who understood that grief wasn't entertainment, that love wasn't manipulation, that an elderly man missing his dead wife wasn't content to be monetized. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, supportive messages, and updates about the story spread. But the calls I'd been receiving all week had stopped completely. Trevor had finally gotten his wish. I'd stopped talking to him. Now the whole world was talking about him instead. By Monday morning, my video had been viewed 2.3 million times. The story had been picked up by major news outlets, trending on Twitter under hashtag Justice for Marcus, and shared across Facebook groups dedicated to elder advocacy and grief support. What had started as one father's attempt to reclaim his narrative had become a national conversation about digital cruelty and family exploitation. Trevor learned about the consequences at 9:15 a.m. when his boss Jennifer Caldwell called him into her office at Zenith Marketing Solutions. I know this because she called me afterward to express her personal support and explain the company's position. Professional courtesy. She called it one working person to another, even though I was retired. "Mr. Donovan, I want you to know that what your son did doesn't reflect our company values," she'd said. We received over 800 emails this weekend from people who saw your video. Our client are concerned about being associated with an employee who participated in elder abuse content. Trevor was terminated immediately. No severance, no references, no second chances. The marketing industry was small and reputation-driven. Jennifer explained. Trevor would find it difficult to get hired anywhere reputable after being identified as the man who'd allowed his father's grief to become viral entertainment. Brianna's empire collapsed even faster. By Sunday evening, she lost 12,000 followers as people discovered the extent of her content exploiting my pain. Fresh Start Vitamins, her biggest sponsor, released a statement distancing themselves from influencers who profit from family trauma. 3 other brands followed suit by Tuesday, citing values misalignment in their termination emails. Her panic was visible in real time across her social media accounts. First came the defensive posts about taking things out of context and not knowing the full story. When those generated more backlash, she pivoted to victim blaming. I want to address the recent controversy, she posted on Instagram Wednesday. Trevor told me his father was emotionally manipulative and that sharing the voicemails was a way to help others recognize toxic behavior. I was trying to educate my audience about boundary setting. I had no idea the full context. The comments were brutal. So you're blaming your boyfriend now? Take responsibility for your cruelty. You literally called his grief pathetic on camera. Own it. This is exactly what manipulative people do. Blame everyone else when caught. By Thursday, she'd thrown Trevor completely under the bus. Her Instagram story featured a lengthy statement about being manipulated by someone I trusted and how she was ending the relationship to focus on healing from this toxic dynamic. She posted screenshots of their private text messages, including ones where Trevor had encouraged her to make more content about his crazy dad, because it was getting good engagement. The final screenshot was her breakup text. I can't be with someone who exploit their own father's grief for social media content. This relationship is over. The irony was exquisite. She was exploiting their breakup for content while claiming to be horrified by exploitation. Trevor's social circle crumbled next. Friends who'd laughed at my voicemails during the party were now embarrassed to be associated with someone featured in national news stories about elder abuse. His gym buddy stopped inviting him to weekend events. Co-workers from previous jobs deleted him from LinkedIn and professional networking groups. His landlord, Robertson, received complaints from other tenants who'd recognized Trevor from the news coverage. People were uncomfortable knowing someone capable of that level of cruelty lived in their building. Mr. Chin told me we called to apologize for his tenant's behavior. He'd given Trevor 30 days notice to vacate. The morning show interview aired Wednesday at 8 a.m. on Good Morning America. I sat in their New York studio, wearing the Navy suit Catherine had helped me pick for Trevor's college graduation, and spoke calmly about how social media had transformed private grief into public entertainment. I'm not asking for sympathy, I told the host. I'm asking for people to think before they turn someone else's pain into content. Behind every viral video making fun of someone's vulnerability is a real person with real feelings. The interview was shared across social media with overwhelmingly positive responses. Elder advocacy groups invited me to speak at conferences. Grief counselors asked to use my story in their training materials. I'd accidentally become a spokesperson for digital dignity and responsible social media use. Roles I'd never wanted but felt obligated to fill. Through it all, I maintained my silence toward Trevor. His desperate calls came from new numbers daily, but I recognized his voice and let them all go to voicemail. I didn't listen to his messages, but I saved them as evidence of his continued inability to respect boundaries. Friday evening, as I was watering Catherine's roses and enjoying the late spring warmth, I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Trevor's voice carried across the yard before I saw him. Dad, please, I know you're here. We need to talk. I set down the watering can and turned to face the young man walking across my lawn. This wasn't the confident marketing professional who'd been embarrassed by his father at the party. This was someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days, whose expensive clothes were wrinkled, whose carefully styled hair was disheveled. Dad, please, he said, stopping a few feet away from me. His voice was raw, desperate. I know I messed up. I know you're angry, but I've lost everything. My job, my apartment, my girlfriend, everything. I stood silent among Catherine's roses, the evening sun casting long shadows across the garden she planted with such love and hope. Trevor took my silence as permission to continue. I was stupid, okay? I was trying to impress Brianna, and she convinced me that sharing those voicemails was helping people understand toxic behavior. I know now that it was wrong. I know I hurt you. His voice broke. You're all I have left, Dad. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at this young man, my son, who'd grown from the boy in the superhero cape to someone I barely recognized. He was crying now, standing in his mother's garden, begging for forgiveness from the father he'd betrayed. But I'd made a promise. The best gift would be me not talking, he'd said. I'd agreed then, and I was keeping my word now. I turned back to the roses and continued watering them, as if he wasn't there at all. Trevor stood in Catherine's garden for 20 minutes, alternating between desperate pleas and angry demands that I acknowledge him. I continued tending the roses, methodically checking each bush for pests and disease, as if the most important conversation of our relationship wasn't happening 3 feet away. Dad, I know you can hear me. This silent treatment is childish. I said I was sorry. What more do you want? I wanted him to understand what he'd done, but explaining would require breaking the promise he'd asked me to make. So I remained silent and let him fill the quiet with increasingly frantic justifications. Brianna manipulated me too. You know, she said sharing those voicemails would help people recognize unhealthy family dynamics. I thought I was doing something good. Still, I said nothing. The evening air was thick with the scent of Catherine's roses and the weight of Trevor's growing panic. Fine, he snapped, his desperation finally curdling into anger. Be childish. But I've lost everything because of your little stunt. My job, my apartment, my relationship. All because you couldn't handle a few jokes at a party. A few jokes. 10 months of grief, love, and vulnerability reduced to a few jokes. I walked into the house, and Trevor followed, his voice rising as he trailed behind me through the kitchen where he'd eaten Catherine's pot roast, past the living room where we'd watched the soccer games on television, up to my study where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years. From my desk drawer, I pulled out a manila folder, the same kind I'd used to organize mail routes for 3 decades. Inside were printouts of everything I'd documented over the past 2 weeks. Screenshots, emails, social media posts, news articles. The complete record of how my son had turned his father's love into entertainment and suffered the consequences. I handed him the folder without a word. Trevor's hands shook as he opened it. The first page was a printout of comments from his former co-workers' Facebook posts. Disgusted to have worked with someone capable of this cruelty. How do you exploit your own father's grief? Trevor Donovan is heartless. Hope he never finds another job in marketing. This industry doesn't need people like him. The second page contained text message screenshots from his friends. Messages I received from people who'd found my contact information to apologize for their behavior at the party. I can't believe I laughed at your voicemails. Trevor made it seem like you were genuinely manipulative. Trevor told us you were emotionally abusive. We had no idea you were just a grieving father. I'm ashamed I participated in mocking you. Trevor painted a completely different picture. Page after page revealed the truth. Trevor hadn't just shared my voicemails. He'd crafted a narrative about me, convinced his friends I was toxic, manipulative, pathetic. He'd turned my grief into evidence of my failures as a parent, my love into proof of my selfishness. The final pages were screenshots of social media comments, thousands of them, from strangers who'd seen the truth and rendered their judgment. Trevor Donovan is the worst kind of person, someone who profits from their parents' pain. I hope his father never speaks to him again. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. This man raised Trevor, sacrificed for him, loved him unconditionally, and Trevor repaid that love by turning his father's grief into entertainment. Unforgivable. Trevor Donovan doesn't deserve a relationship with his father. Trevor's face grew paler with each page. By the time he reached the end, tears were streaming down his cheeks. Not tears of remorse, Tears of realization. He understood now what I'd done, how I'd won. You let them do your talking for you, he whispered. I nodded. You knew this would happen. You knew everyone would turn against me. I'd hoped it would happen, but I'd known something more important. The truth, when presented clearly and completely, was more powerful than any lie. I'd simply given people the full story Trevor had been editing for months. Trevor closed the folder and looked at me with something between awe and horror. You destroyed my entire life without saying a word. For the first time in 2 weeks, I spoke to my son. You said the best gift would be me not talking. I said quietly, my voice steady in a way that had comforted him through childhood nightmares and teenage heartbreaks. I agreed to give you that gift, but sometimes silence is the loudest thing of all. I took the folder from his hands. I kept my promise, Trevor. I stopped talking to you, but I never promised to stop talking to everyone else. The whole world heard what kind of son you really are. They heard it in your girlfriend's videos, in your social media posts, in the laughter of your friends, while my grief played for their entertainment. Trevor's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I didn't tell them you were cruel. I continued. I didn't tell them you were heartless. I simply showed them your own actions, your own words, your own choices. I let you reveal exactly who you are to everyone who matters. I walked a window and looked out at Catherine's garden, where the roses bloomed despite the chaos that had consumed our family. Your mother always said that actions speak louder than words. She was right. Your actions spoke so loudly that the whole world heard them. Now you have to live with what they said. Trevor stood in my study for several more minutes, clutching the folder like evidence of his own execution. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. Is there any way back from this, Dad? Any way to fix what I've done? I turned from a window and looked at the young man I'd raised, the child I'd loved unconditionally, the son who traded my trust for social media likes. I kept my promise. I repeated, the best gift would be me not talking. You have that gift forever now. Trevor left through the front door without another word. I heard his car start, then drive away, carrying him toward whatever life awaited someone who'd learned too late that some betrayals echo louder than any apology. I returned to Catherine's garden as the sun set behind the oak tree we'd planted for Trevor's 10th birthday. The roses were thriving, their blooms fuller and more vibrant than they'd been in years. Catherine had always said that roses needed both sunshine and storms to grow strong. My grief was still there, it would always be there, but it was private again, protected, no longer content for strangers to consume. My dignity was restored, my love for Catherine honored, my boundaries finally respected. I picked up the watering can and continued tending Catherine's roses, surrounded by the comfortable silence of a man who'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people show the world exactly who they are. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinions of this story in the comments. To listen to more stories, click on one of the boxes showing on your screen. Thank you for watching.